Okay, picture this. It's December 21st, 1970. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, is decked out in a purple velvet suit, and he just walks up to the White House gates unannounced, holding a handwritten letter for the President of the United States. What happened next was a meeting so completely surreal, its official photo is still the single most requested picture in the entire history of the National Archive.
So, you have to wonder what on earth happened in that room. What does this absolutely bizarre encounter between Elvis Presley and Richard Nixon really tell us about fame, power, and a country that was in the middle of a massive drug crisis? All right, let's get into it. So, this whole story kicks off on an American Airlines flight. Elvis, who is getting really worried about the country's drug culture and all the anti-establishment stuff going on, just starts scribbling this 6-page letter to President Nixon. In it, he basically offers himself up as a secret weapon in the war on drugs. He truly believed he could connect with young people in a way the government just couldn't. And as one condition, get this, he wanted to be made a federal agent at large.
And believe me, this was not just some quick photo op. The official White House memo from that meeting shows just how serious Elvis was. According to this memo, he passionately told the president he wanted to help restore respect for the flag. He even went after the Beatles, calling them a real force for anti-American spirit and claiming they made their money in the U.S. and then pushed an anti-American agenda. He just kept repeating how much he wanted to help, convinced that a federal badge would give him the street cred he needed. Now, I know what you're thinking. A rock star asking for a narcotics badge sounds completely absurd, right? But you've got to understand the context of the time. Nixon's team wasn't just playing along with the celebrity. They were in the first phase of a brand new, super aggressive federal strategy. Let's just look at this timeline for a second. Only 2 years before Elvis showed up, the BNDD, which was the forerunner to today's DEA, was created. The very same year Elvis had his meeting, Congress passed the massive Controlled Substances Act. Nixon was out there declaring an all-out global war on the drug menace. So in that kind of climate, the idea of using the world's biggest celebrity as a spokesperson, well, it probably seemed like a brilliant PR move. And just like that, Elvis got his badge. But this is where the story takes a really dark and deeply ironic turn. Because the man who volunteered to be a public soldier in the war on drugs was in private fighting a devastating battle with addiction. And he was losing. The contradiction is just staggering, really. In his letter to Nixon, Elvis actually claimed he'd done an in-depth study of drug abuse. But the private reality was a medicine cabinet overflowing with powerful, addictive prescription pills. When he died only 7 years later, the toxicology report revealed this whole cocktail of opiates and sedatives. We're talking Dilaudid, Percodan, Demerol, Quaaludes, the list goes on. So you have to ask yourself, how could a man so publicly against street drugs become so incredibly dependent on prescription ones? Well, the answer really lies in a system of enablers that completely shielded him from the real world, a system that came with his unbelievable fame. And a huge part of that system was this man, Dr. Nick, Elvis's personal doctor for almost a decade. At a hearing, Dr. Nicopolis straight up admitted to prescribing thousands upon thousands of doses of addictive pills to Elvis. His defense, which you can see right here in this quote, was basically that he was trying to control the addiction and stop Elvis from looking for even worse stuff on the black market. A jury actually acquitted him, but the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners later suspended his license for good. It was just a tragic downward spiral. His opiate abuse led to absolutely severe chronic constipation, a really common but also dangerous side effect. And that was made so much worse by a terrible diet, obesity, and what looked like type 2 diabetes. On top of all of that, he had an underlying heart condition, an enlarged heart muscle. So you've got a body under enormous strain, all being fueled by a doctor who was willing to keep the prescriptions flowing. And all of these different factors, they all came to a head on August 16th, 1977 at Graceland, his Memphis mansion. It led to a tragic end and an immediate scramble to protect the king's legacy at all costs. He was only 42 years old. Just 42. A bloated, faded version of the young man who had changed music forever. He was found unconscious on his bathroom floor by his girlfriend. Now listen to this. The initial public statement from the pathologist was crystal clear. Drugs were not involved. But this was, and there's no other way to put this, a deliberate cover-up. The other 2 pathologists who worked on the case later admitted that the lead pathologist did this at the request of Elvis's family. They were horrified at the thought of the man Nixon had made an anti-drug agent dying from a drug overdose. But, the truth has a way of coming out. A few weeks later, the full toxicology report came back, and it confirmed his blood was full of high levels of opiates. The consensus that emerged was that his death was caused by a massive heart attack, probably brought on by the immense physical strain from his opiate abuse. The drugs weren't just a contributing factor, they were the central cause of his death. And that, of course, brings us right back to the badge. The very symbol of his supposed crusade against drugs became the perfect emblem of his own tragic hypocrisy. He got the federal credentials he wanted so badly, but he could never escape the addiction that was secretly killing him from the inside out. So in the end, you're left with this incredibly complex question. Was Elvis a victim of the insane pressures of fame, of a medical system that just enabled him, or was he a victim of his own choices? The truth, just like the man himself, is probably somewhere in the middle. A truly larger-than-life tragedy that is just as fascinating as it is absolutely heartbreaking.